This episode of Profiles in Risk is sponsored by IA-Path. IA-Path, unlocking your adjusting superpowers. Go to iapath.com.
This is Profiles in Risk. Hosted by Nick Lamparelli. Every week, we interview those who risk life, limb, fortunes, career, and reputation, and those who work behind the scenes who look to protect and enlighten us about risk. You can find the show notes and other insurance-related content at insnerds.com. That's insnerds.com. Now, on to the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Profiles in Risk. I'm your host, Nick Lamparelli. I am here on a lovely morning in Washington, D.C. for the National Flood Conference, and I'm taking time out of my schedule to talk to my special guest. My guest today is Charles Specht. Charles is president of Permission Group. Permission Group exists to teach insurance producers the fastest, smartest, and most ethical approach to building a $1 million book of business. Charles, welcome to Profiles in Risk.
Nick, thank you very much for spending some time to talk with me this morning. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well. You know, there's a lot of conversation going out in the industry about the talent gap and the inability for insurance agencies and brokerages to train and hire and retain the next generation of producers. And that's what you do. So I've been following what you do on social media for a while. You're a natural to come onto this show. So I want to talk about Permission Group and what you're doing to train producers. But let's start at the beginning. Let's rewind the tape, go back to the beginning of your career. How did you get into insurance?
All right. Well, I got into the insurance business back in the year 2000. A friend introduced me to it once I got out of college. And I think it was like most people that I was looking at it like insurance. You know, it's not something that I'm really interested in. But, you know, once I visited the agency, once I talked with the ownership, once they give me a little bit of an overview of what really insurance was about, it was very attractive. And I think it's like that's maybe the experience of a lot of people. It's not something they thought insurance would, you know, be attractive to them. But once they figure it out, it really is a beautiful industry. So I started on the brokerage side on a P&C agency and was doing insurance sales. And so I started back in the year 2000 with a company called Interwest Insurance, which is a large agency, a large regional agency on the West Coast in California. And I was in a little bit of a smaller rural profit center. So I was selling insurance mostly to subcontractors. I was doing pretty well and was enjoying it, but the management lived about 2 hours away. And so the agency really kind of struggled with just the day-to-day management. And so after about a year and a half, I decided to leave that agency and I went to work for Arthur J. Gallagher, which is obviously a very large organization, both nationally and internationally. And I was at Gallagher for about 8 years, doing pretty well, really enjoyed everything that was going on. But there was a sense in which myself and my wife and my family, we wanted a little bit maybe of a change in regards to direction of where we're going. So I had decided to go into pastoral ministry. So I took a senior pastor position at a local church in the country here, a bivocational position. And because of that, I really couldn't sell insurance full time any longer. So what I did was I rolled my book of business basically on a 3-year buyout. Then I set up a consulting practice where I began working with construction companies, mostly some real estate investment firms and so forth. But I would help them with loss control and risk management. I would manage their insurance agents locally and nationally, just making sure that the agents were doing what they were supposed to be doing, you know, helping them with claims, even in some places helping them figure out how to increase their annual revenues. And so I continued to do that for a couple of years, and I enjoyed it. I still do it now, but it's not really most of what I do now. Now, I actually focus on working with insurance agents because as I was working with my construction company clients, I was working with their agents quite often. And so I just began to realize that a lot of these agents really don't know what it is that they're doing. They don't really understand the value or really how to relate that value, describe it to an insured or a prospect. Many of these agents were contacting my clients and asking to offer quotes, but there was really no reason for my client to want to work with them because there was nothing there shown of value. So I just began to see that big hole in the marketplace for insurance sales training, because frankly, most insurance agencies provide really little to no training. And so I began working with agents. I started that on another branch to my consulting practice, and that branch has really blossomed into the whole tree. So in essence, probably 95 to 99% of what I do today is I work with independent agents and agencies really around the United States, where I am training them on how to sell. I named my consulting practice Permission Group because everything really focuses on getting the permission of the insured. And once you have that complete buy-in from the insurance buyer that they are confident and comfortable with working with you, then you can really then go to the next step. And so I help them with, pre-qualification. I help them with setting up their value and differentiation into the insurance marketplace. I work with insurance agencies with their entire production staff, but I would say probably right around 50 to 60% of my clients now are independent agents who contact me directly and pay for my sales training out of their own pocket. Their insurance agencies just don't have the money, the time, or the resources, frankly, to do it. And so many of them are paying for it themselves. And so I have a digital course that teaches, everything step by step. But the predominant factor in my sales training is the broker of record letter. I truly believe that nothing says you have my permission like a signed broker of record letter. And when you have the broker of record letter, you have the insured's permission to represent you to the marketplace. And so that's the focus of all of my sales training for every independent agent and agency I work with around the United States.
And we're going to go into that part of it. So this is a common theme, right? So you came into insurance, you were kind of thrown into the production side. What are your recollections about your initial foray, right? So was it sink or swim? How did you train yourself? How did you get yourself, without your own training, without you having the permission group, how did you learn and acquire the wisdom in order to become a valuable producer that you could then train other people? How did you acquire that skill set?
I believe that I was relatively fortunate from the standpoint that I had a friend who got me into the industry, and I worked at the same agency where he was at. And so he and I kind of partnered together, and I shadowed him. So he had already been in the industry for about 3 or 4 years, and he was, he wasn't a principal at the agency. He was just an agent, but we partnered together. And looking back on it, I was really probably the prospecting arm of the duo. So I was doing the cold calling and so forth. And then he would come in to really sell the account, and I would just watch and take notes and begin putting together applications. But it really was a shadowing training that I was just kind of following and watching. And that really is, in essence, how most, I think, insurance agencies do it. And I also know that it probably hindered his growth at the time, because I shadowed him for that year and a half. And he was, in essence, then relying upon, even my work in regards to prospecting. And so he was slowing down in his prospecting. So even though we were, I believe, successful together, I also believe that we probably didn't write as much business, and he certainly didn't, if he wasn't having to, train another agent, and bring that agent around. If we could have done it separately and really prospected our own, we probably would have written more business. But in essence, that's how the training model was of that agency. We just followed that. I followed that agent, just kind of saw how they did it. We traveled together. We talked. Occasionally he would show me how to put together an app, but then we would come together for the final proposal, and he was the one who would do most of the speaking during that time. And so that was really, in essence, my training for, I think, a year to year and a half. I did go to a producer school. The agency paid for me to go to a producer school for a couple of weeks. But other than that, there was no other training from anyone in the agency, other than that, just one particular agent who just happened to be my friend.
At what stage in your early career did you realize, boy, if I can just get the broker of record letter? And by the way, for the listeners that may not understand that, it's a document that basically signs over the relationship to the carrier from one broker to another. The broker essentially just acquires all of the policies that are listed in that broker of record letter in one fell swoop without having to fill out new applications or anything. The policies just switch from one broker to another. When did you figure that out? At what stage did you realize that that's the competitive element that I need to build the trust to get to? How did you put that puzzle together?
Yeah, and that's actually, I think, when I really look back on it, it's just an interesting scenario. So depending upon where your listeners are at in the country, they might call it an AOR, which is an agent of record, or the broker of record, BOR. But at the first agency I was at Interwest, we very rarely ever did broker of record letters. In fact, it wasn't even something on the radar screen. It was just, we were a quoting factory, if you will. We were just contacting insureds and we were just quoting. I don't even know if I knew what a broker of record letter was at that first agency, which was how out of the picture that really even was from a business model. When I went to the second agency, Arthur J. Gallagher, it really wasn't even necessarily something that was taught or even presented or pushed onto the agents that's maybe what you should focus on. I certainly focused on it, I'd say later in the second half of my career with Gallagher, which was probably about 6 to 7 years into my insurance career. But at the same time, I really didn't use it as a predominant prospecting factor. I did get a number of clients from that, but I never really realized the power of it going forward. It really, frankly, Nick, wasn't until I started my consulting practice and began working with the insurance buyers that I realized that what these agents really need is just to become the broker of record. And so once I began, working with my construction clients over the course of time, and then seeing all of these agents, contacting and just asking to offer a quote, I just began to realize that, gosh, as an entire insurance industry, we're totally missing the boat here. And so then I began working with my construction clients and thinking and asking them, what is it that you really want from all of these agents going forward? And so I began to realize that they want, they obviously want to have save some money on premium. They want to, save time in regards to the whole process. But the big issue was that they wanted to have peace of mind, that at the end of the day, they didn't want to buy a policy from an agent who wasn't going to be able to follow through, wasn't going to be able to provide the level of services and expertise that they needed. And so I began to realize that really what they want is they want to choose the right broker who's going to provide the right services to them. But the whole model of the insurance industry wasn't geared towards that, because agents would call up and say, can I offer a quote? And it was just completely opposite to really what the insurance buyers wanted. And so during that process, that's when I really began to formulate the whole idea of what the broker of record letter really does, and what an insurance agent needs to do in order to put pieces together so that the insurance buyer would understand that they were the obvious choice of which agent to do business with. And then once they realized that they were the obvious choice to move forward, then all that was required was one signature on a piece of paper in order to make that happen. And as I began putting everything piece by piece and putting together a timeline of services, really developing a strategy and a system on what to do, step A, step B, and step C, it really began to work. And I noticed that a lot of my clients then were, getting what they wanted from the agent, and the agents were just much more happy about it because they didn't have to go through a quoting process and throw mud up against the wall and to see what stuck. They knew that once they got the signature on the BOR, they automatically had a loyal client going forward. And so that was the win. They didn't have to bog down the quoting process with the marketing department. They didn't have to send and blanket the insurance marketplace to try and block out all the carriers, because they had the permission of the client to move forward on their behalf. And it's just a much better way to do business.
Could you talk about putting the pieces together? So, to get to that stage where an insured is actually signing over the BOR, you have to get to a very high level of trust, signing over everything. What are some of the pieces of the puzzle that they have to put together, that the producer has to put and formulate for the insured to get them to that level?
And we'll get right back to this podcast right after a short message from our sponsor. I'm back with Chris Stanley, founder of IAPath. Chris, when someone is interested in becoming an independent adjuster or independent appraiser, what can IAPath offer them?
Nick, at IAPath, we recognize that getting people to take a chance on a new vendor or independent adjuster is challenging. So one thing that we do to help IAs is train them, certify them, and mentor them. We want to give them the skills to actually do the job and in turn give the hiring companies confidence to try out our graduates. We call these interactive online courses and mentorships boot camps. We also offer self-paced training videos and IA networking and support through our monthly membership that we call the League of IAs.
Learn to write auto, heavy truck, and other claim types with IAPath's online trainings. Unlock your adjusting superpowers. Go to iapath.com.
Could you talk about putting the pieces together? So, to get to that stage where an insured is actually signing over the BOR, you have to get to a very high level of trust, signing over everything. What are some of the pieces of the puzzle that they have to put together, that the producer has to put and formulate for the insured to get them to that level?
Definitely. And maybe I could even use a couple of examples of what it would be like. So if you wanted Italian food, you wouldn't go to, a general restaurant who makes, burgers and pasta and Mexican food. You would probably want to go to someplace that specializes in Italian food. If you needed to have surgery, on your appendix, you would go to a surgeon. You wouldn't go to a general pediatrician, for example. And so we go to specialists for certain things that we need. The problem with most agents is that they specialize only up to a certain point, but for the most part, they're generalists. What insureds really want, insurance buyers, is they want somebody who not just understands their industry, but is going to understand the major problems that they have in their individual, unique micro niche. And so it's kind of a word that I sort of coined just to really make agents understand what we're talking about. It's the word micro niche. It's that we're not just going to be generalists. We can certainly write anything, but we're going to advertise ourselves, market ourselves, and brand ourselves so that we really appeal to a certain type of risk, so that that risk would notice us as the obvious choice of which agency to work with. So think about it from this perspective. Nick, you, myself, everybody who has an insurance license in the United States has micro-niched themselves in one way or another. So when I got out of college, I could have gone into any industry, but I chose eventually to go into insurance. So I began niching myself into the insurance industry. I could have gone into the health or life side, but I chose to niche myself into property and casualty. I could have gone to an insurance carrier or a claims management company, but I chose to go to an independent agency. I could have then focused on any type of an account, but I began niching myself into construction. And I think that really is how it works out. We all begin niching ourselves, but the problem with insurance agents is that they stop too soon. They might call themselves, a specialist in construction or a specialist in manufacturing or a specialist in food and beverage, but that's an industry and not an actual niche. Okay. So if you really begin to break it down, and this is kind of how I'm answering your question, is that what a residential plumbing subcontractor wants to have is an agent who understands the plumbing industry, not merely just construction insurance. Okay? Because the plumbing contractor deals with a lot of different things in his or her business every single day. They're trying to figure out how to get more clients, right? They're trying to figure out how to get more customers, how to get more repeat customers. They're trying to figure out how to find better employees and how to train them, how to keep them. They have so many different things that they're dealing with, how to find, better, product to put into the places, how to find, different services that they need for their own business, like websites and social media and so forth. These are really the issues. Insurance is certainly a ticket item that they have, but it's not the thing necessarily that's keeping them up at night. So if an insurance agent can begin micro-niching him or herself into the plumbing subcontractor industry and begin putting together products and services specifically dealing with the plumbing industry that are not, and this is the key, are not insurance related. They're going to be seen by the insured as somebody who's in the plumbing industry that just happens to have a specialization in insurance and financial services. That's the key. If they just see you as another insurance agent, they don't need you. They already have an insurance agent. Now, there's already somebody seated in their chair, and they've already got an insurance agent, and it's quite unlikely that they're going to switch and go to another generalist insurance agency, which is why that industry standard is about 92% of the time in commercial insurance, the incumbent agent's going to retain the business because they just don't see any real difference between one agent and another. And so then what I teach my clients to do is to really begin micro niching into a certain segment that they want to go after, putting together products and services that really meet the need of that specific insured. Restaurants, for example, insurance is not a big ticket item, but they do need a whole lot of help with regards to social media. They need a lot of help with their websites. They need a lot of help getting repeat customer traffic through their doors. They need a lot of help training the waiters and waitresses how to upsell on the dessert menu. These are the big things that restaurants try to figure out. And so when an insurance agent can come and provide these types of services or products, to them and show them that this is the type of service that they offer to them. And oh, by the way, we obviously are experts at, the restaurant, industry, specifically in regards to Italian food. We know all the policies and carriers that will write that. Then having you as the agent rather than just some other agent who's just, an agent on the insurance policy is a no-brainer. And so once you can really systematize that and show that to a prospect going forward, you become the obvious choice. And all that is required for them to unseat or terminate the relationship with the other agent and begin utilizing you and your expertise in the micro niche is one signature on a piece of paper. It really is a beautiful thing, Nick. It's the best way to actually do insurance. And frankly, I think that that's where the industry is going as a whole. Just all business is changing, all business is continuing to evolve. And today's insurance agent and agency is going to have to actually provide a lot more services to their particular clients in order to maintain those clients going forward. Many of the savvy insurance agencies that I know of are utilizing technology. They're really getting focused in, one particular industry. They're providing a level of services and products just to that industry, and they're getting a lot of clients overall. Because after all is said and done, really one agent, probably from a commercial standpoint, or whether it's personal lines or health or whatever it is, group health, really you can probably have only about 50 or so clients, even from a commercial standpoint, that you can adequately service and renew on a regular basis, depending upon, how large they are that you're going after. So, we're only talking 50 clients. Okay, you're only talking 50 clients that you need in order to create and build a book of business that you're going to be able to be, happy with and satisfied and, have a good family and provide for the needs of your family going forward. 50 clients. You don't need to write everybody. So you might as well pick one particular niche that you enjoy, that you're passionate about, really focus into it, dive into it, and provide a certain level of expertise in that industry that the typical competition out there is not providing. You're going to get better clients. You're going to get loyal clients. You're going to be able to keep those clients over the course of time, and you're actually going to be able to get them much more quickly when you begin micro niching.
I really love that advice. I think mostly because first it works, right? It's working for you. It's working for the folks that pay for your services, but it's so applicable in everyday life. That's the exact same advice I give with career consulting. Is you're in a company, micro niche. Find that one small thing that only you become the expert at, and everyone will come to you. And once you become an expert at something, it's like it's infectious. They think you're smart at anything or other things as well. It kind of spreads out. The level of credibility and trust goes through the roof. So I really love that advice. When someone comes to Permission Group, could you walk us through what do they get? Is it online, offsite, on-site, the length of time? What does Permission Group's offering, if someone were to sign up, what could they expect to get?
Okay, well, depending upon what type of client they are and where they're at geographically and really what their budget is. So I offer a few different things. So I am on retainer with a few different agencies, around the country. So I have clients in California, I have clients in Florida, I have clients in Texas. And so I do a lot of virtual training with their individual agents. Each and every one of my clients, regardless of whether they're one-on-one coaching clients or, from agency retainers, gets access to my digital course, Millionaire Insurance Producer. So it is a course that I specifically put together that's video-based, it's content-based, it has downloads, there's exercises that you go through, and the whole process is to begin building a $1 million book of business through signed broker of record letters. And so I provide that to each and every one of my clients as just part of the service. But for those insurance agents maybe around the country who can't afford one-on-one coaching, or maybe their agency hasn't paid for it, they can actually purchase the digital course just individually. So you can purchase it. You'd have 24/7 lifetime access to it. But it teaches the step-by-step process of everything really that I teach my individual one-on-one coaching clients. When I do have agents around the country who hire me for one-on-one coaching, we would typically have regularly scheduled, no less than once a week, but we would have a regularly scheduled telephone consultation where we're going through the curriculum of the course, we're working through your micro niches, we're talking about your prospects, we're putting together, and this is also very instrumental, we're putting together a 12-month timeline of services that you would show to a prospect going forward. Because the biggest issue, Nick, frankly, that any insurance agency or agent has in the prospecting channel is that the insured does not know what it would be like to do business with you. And so they're unwilling to make a switch to a new agency if all things being equal or even close. So you really have to, show your prospect what it is that it's going to be like to do business with you. And so putting together a very detailed timeline of services for a 12-month period of exactly what you're going to do and which date. So there needs to be dates attached to it. There needs to be insurance-related things and non-insurance-related things. But we put all of this together specific to your micro niche. And so I do that in the individual digital course, but I also do it with my one-on-one coaching clients. So we have regularly scheduled telephone consultations, and then each of my clients, whether they are one-on-one or agency retainer, I'm basically available to them 24/7. And so they have my cell phone number. They can always call me and talk about any issues. Prospects they're dealing with, I love to talk about their prospects and how they handle those going forward, what they should do, what they should say, how they should position themselves. So I'm dealing with them via text message and email, really any way in which they're willing to communicate. I do a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. Frankly, I get probably about 80 to 85% of my clients via LinkedIn. I just utilize that platform, and that and YouTube is probably really the two ways in which I get most of my clients. But I try to be as hands-on as possible, because I know that my clients get a lot more success, meaning they get more clients themselves, when we're doing a little bit of a hand-holding process through the entire sales process.
You brought up something earlier about how a lot of your clients pay out of pocket. I think that's something that irks me. We've had several producers on the show, and the talent gap is real, and it just seems as though the agencies themselves are unwilling, or it just doesn't seem economically viable for them to train the next generation of producers. What can be done to solve that problem? Because it's problematic. The agents have to come out of their pocket. Again, it's sink or swim. If you could have a really good potential producer that just doesn't have the financial capability of paying someone like you to make them a superstar, it just seems it's in the agency's best interest to provide those resources.
I could not agree with you more. It is a challenge. It is a problem. I do believe that the more savvy insurance agencies are figuring it out, but I think that a lot of it is also going to depend upon insurance carriers and wholesalers and GAs going forward. Okay, so the larger agencies that have money, they can spend and they can invest in some of this training. So I do have some clients that are with Brown and Brown and Gallagher and Aon and Marsh. I have a lot of clients in the larger firms, but I would say frankly the most of my clients fall within the small to medium sized agency, with many of them even towards what I would say 20 employees or less on an agency side. And so an agency of that size just doesn't have the actual capital to invest in training for all of their people. And it's a significant hurdle. I do know that, that's why I've tried to actually set up my training virtually, because, it doesn't require me coming in to, sit down with somebody. So it's actually a lot less expensive for an agency to do it that way. But I do see that many of them are switching. I see that agencies are leaving the generalist mindset and starting to go towards a micro niche mindset. And when that happens, the training does get a little bit easier. And so I'm actually right now in the process of of developing and rolling out an entire agency training model so that this can be completely virtual, with regards to, videos and content, but then also group training seminars and so forth, so that it's not something necessarily that they would have to do. But I can also tell you this, Nick, that I've been actually talking, have already even signed a couple of agreements with insurance carriers and wholesalers on doing this directly for the insurance agents. And this, I think, is what is key. It is usually the insurance carriers that tend to be more micro niched than even the insurance agencies. So if you were to talk to your typical insurance company out there, you talk to a sales rep, they'll many times give you an appetite guide. It's the typical things that the typical classes of business that insurance carriers want to write. They're not going to write everybody. No insurance company is out there that does that. And so they are all micro niched. And so what I'm now seeing some of these insurance companies begin to figure out is that if they could begin working with, a select number of their more, successful and loyal agencies and putting together sales training that's not really going to teach the agent how to sell their product. That's not needed. What is needed is how to, sell the insured in that specific industry. And then the loyalty of the agent is going to more than likely place the business with that carrier who already has a specialization in that type of industry. And so I'm beginning to see a little bit of a trend from the carrier side doing this, but I think that it's probably going to initially start with the wholesaler and GA side, because those are the ones that are, they really have maybe the ear of a lot of these agents in regards to specific classes of business. And so some of these, wholesalers and GAs are paying me to actually put together a branding sales model to train all of their agents on how to actually sell for the specific industries and micro niches that wholesaler is going after. And so we're putting together products and services for them. So if I can use the example of restaurants, what the wholesaler is going to be doing now is putting together services and products specific to the restaurant industry. So teaching them how to get repeat customer traffic, teaching them how to do social media for their company. And oh, by the way, we also have the best policy for restaurants. So putting together that and then teaching their agents how to actually sell the products and services to that industry going forward. I'm starting to see that trend in the industry a little bit, Nick, because the typical small mom and pop, even to medium-sized insurance agency, doesn't have the financial wherewithal to be able to actually do that, themselves. I am seeing that, there are agents, both personal lines agency, as I work with personal lines agencies, certainly many of those that specialize in high net worth. I have some agencies that are 100% employee health benefits, and they're really focusing on that as well. A lot of P&C shops and mixed shops in between. And those that I see are being a little bit more savvy and are thinking forward, changing with the times and utilizing technology, are the ones who are beginning to invest in sales training specific to a micro niche. It's just a better way to do it. Maybe if I can even use an example, like, if an agency contacts a business just to offer a quote, many times that business might say yes, and then they're probably going to do a little bit of research on you either before or after the meeting. So they're going to maybe check out your website, they might check out your LinkedIn and so forth. And if you just come across, like every other insurance agency out there, it's just a very generalist website, a generalist LinkedIn that just says you're an insurance agent, like there's no reason for them to want to do business with you. But if you're contacting landscape contractors, okay? And you're prospecting landscape contractors, and everything in your LinkedIn profile talks about landscape contractors and what landscape contractors can do to increase revenue and decrease sales. And your website, basically says right on the main page, we insure landscape contractors. You are positioning yourself as the obvious choice going forward. And so there's a lot of things that you can actually do to tweak your positioning in your prospecting model, your branding, to a specific niche, and you haven't even gotten into the sales side of it yet. That's going to put you so much further ahead of the curve. So there's just a lot of different things, but those are some of the trends that I'm seeing in the future. And even as you mentioned, like how to get many of these people into the insurance industry. I think that really is the key. You want to show college graduates, college students, people who are looking for a new career, that insurance is a great industry, but even from the sales side, it's not insurance. It's relationships. You're sitting down with somebody who owns a spa, and you're trying to figure out, how you can help them even get more profitable in the spa industry. So if you enjoy visiting spas, you might as well spend all of your time prospecting and visiting spas. I know some agents who, they love playing tennis, and so all they do is they just go and they prospect and visit tennis resorts all the time. They play tennis, and they go and they play tennis with the decision makers, and that's how they actually prospect. So when you think about it, they're in the insurance industry, but really they're in the tennis industry. They just happen to have a specialization where they make their living off of selling the insurance to the tennis place. And if we really began to market the insurance industry like that, I think that we would start having lines of people wanting to get into the insurance industry, because it is an industry where you can make a very, very good living, but it's also an industry where you can focus on anything that you want to do. If you really have a joy, about one particular industry, whether it's nonprofits and, you just have a passion for helping people with substance abuse problems, you can just focus on substance abuse companies, nonprofits or for-profits, whatever, really just help them and spend all of your time in that industry, but also, making a living by selling the insurance for that particular industry. That, I think, really is where insurance and insurance recruiting needs to go, because when we begin marketing the insurance industry that way, when we brand the insurance industry that way, we're going to be able to attract the better talent into the industry, because it gives them a chance to be in any industry they want with just a specialization in the insurance side.
I really love that message. And for, folks that are, devoted listeners, thank you, to this podcast. Your message rings. We had Patrick Muscienti, who's a producer in the Ohio area, and he was talking about the need for carriers to kind of step up. And now that you're seeing that and you have some of that in place, it's really good to see. I'm curious what you think about how the digital revolution, digital innovation, is going to affect producers in the future.
I do believe that any producer or agency that does not begin to utilize technology is going to get left in the dust, without question. Now, from a consumer standpoint, myself, I don't necessarily like to communicate with chatbots and bots. I like to talk to a person. But at the same time, I know that I've also had, some amazing experiences so far. I think maybe even in the last couple of months where different companies have used chatbots, and it's been like a tremendous experience. So I'm, even as a consumer, beginning to shift my mentality a little bit, that I don't mind that, because it probably saved me a lot of time. It was very efficient. So I do think things like chatbots and the utilization of technology, is very important going forward. But I also think that you don't need as much technology as you think. And frankly, a good website, strong social media channel, a website that has a platform where, you could have customers log in, to do different things in their insurance policy, add vehicles and so forth. These things are becoming not an option, that they are becoming non-optional behavior. So I think that for those insurance agencies that don't do this going forward, they're either going to have to sell out their agency, or they're just going to run it off, until it all just, goes away. Because I do believe that that's how just the world has changing. I don't know of anybody who doesn't have a smartphone. I personally use my smartphone for everything except for, telephone calls for the most part. I use it to do everything. I use it to make payments. I use it to check out people. I use it to connect with people. I use it to communicate. And every policyholder out there that I know, for the most part, they do that as well. So we have to begin utilizing it, but we also have to make sure that we don't overburden the consumer, because there's a certain point in which I want to actually talk to somebody. Like, I don't need to have an insurance agent for myself who lives down the street. I don't mind doing business with somebody in a different state. I don't necessarily have to see you. But I do want to be able to communicate with you. I don't want to communicate with just pure technology, all the time. So I am becoming more of a proponent of technology, and certainly even chatbots that can help me get to that standpoint. But I still need to know that there's a name behind my agency. And, back when I was selling insurance, I had some clients who would pay me, a few $100,000 of premium, or pay the carrier rather, a few $100,000 of premium, but I actually never saw them. I never met them. They were far away geographically, and I just was unable to actually meet with them. But it was a trust relationship that everything could be done via, email, telephone, and so forth. And that's where the world is going. I truly believe that an agency that does not invest in that or utilize that is going to end up either having to sell out or just going out of business because they're not going to be able to compete in the long run.
Yeah. It's weird how our tastes change. Like I'm not comfortable with the bots yet, but I don't really want to talk to anyone either. I don't want to wait on.
I know.
So I have the right agent. I have an agent I can just send an email and just say, add this car, do this, do that. And I think I've spoken to them once since I've had them as an agent for like 3 years. So it fits, it fits my personality. I think you're hitting on something though. It's really, with the, diversity of humans and customers out there, everyone's going to want to communicate in their own special, unique way. And for the, the agency system, the carrier system, whatever, we need to adapt to that. We need to be able to communicate to people in the way that they want to be communicated with, and not necessarily, this is the way it is, take it or leave it.
And what you're saying like hits the nail right on the head. I mean, there's a lot of great insurtech coming in that's making the independent agent and life better. There's a lot that's making it better. But where I do see technology really falling short is just the ability to be able to document that into the agency CRM system. Okay, so you see a lot of policyholders, personal lines as well as commercial, they want to communicate via text messages. Well, most agency management systems can't document that, and so you begin having this huge gap for E&O. The insurance industry is going to have to figure that out, because the insured is going to want to communicate in whichever way they want to communicate. You're not going to be able to force the policyholder to communicate in the way that you want to, otherwise you will lose that client. Give you an example. I have a coaching client, out in Nevada, and she was telling me about one of her clients. It was initially a prospect, not a client, but 100% of the communication was via text message. That she initially got referred into it by a friend who gave her this contractor's cell phone number. So she texted him because she said that's how he communicates. They've just been texting back and forth. It wasn't a huge account, so he texted the VIN number for the vehicles. He texted the property information. There wasn't even a telephone conversation until finally, after the last text message, when she said, here's what the premium is going to be, here's the carrier and so forth, he said, okay, let's go ahead and bind that thing. And that's when she finally said, well, I'm actually going to need at least to have, a signature going forward. But I just feel that that's the way that many policyholders want to communicate. They don't want to necessarily waste, 2 hours of their life having to drive into your office, or spend 2 hours of their life sitting down with you to talk about insurance and gather signatures and so forth. We're going to have to be able to communicate with the prospects and the clients in the way that they want to communicate, that feels comfortable with them. And then we, as the insurance independent agency channel, we're going to have to figure out how to document all of that from an E&O standpoint. And that's where I think InsurTech really needs to step up the game, and certainly these agency management systems.
Yeah, thank you for that insightful answer. This is the part of the podcast, Charles, where we transition and we get to learn a little bit more about you as a person, and not as the insurance person, but as a human being. So I always ask all of my guests, when you aren't working, what do you enjoy doing?
I love reading leadership books. I do really enjoy readership books. I also know that being an insurance consultant, I have to be creative. I have to think outside the box. And one of the things I love doing is exercising. I love going on walks. I try not to listen to any, music or, podcasts while I'm doing it, because it allows my mind to just think. When I read novels, I read stories, it really, heightens the creativity, which I do think translates into just to a better consulting practice. So I do a lot of reading, both leadership books and novels. I love to exercise, and I need to do it more, but I love to just go on long walks. I mentioned, pastoring before. So, I do really enjoy just the church life and interacting with, people on a regular basis. So I was pastoring for about 7 years, and I have 5 children. The youngest 2 we adopted from China. They have special needs. My youngest son is blind, so he has a lot of special needs. So unfortunately, I love the church where we were at for that 7 years, but we had to move. We had to move to a more metropolitan area where he could get more services. So I recently had to step down from that church. We moved to a more metropolitan area where, he is getting a lot more services for, Braille and blind and so forth. So I'm kind of in between maybe what I was doing before in regards to pastoring. But, I'm going around right now and just speaking at different churches and, just trying to teach people, really what the Bible teaches and so forth. And that's really one of my greatest passions in life.
And you are a published author. I looked you up and noticed you had a couple of books on this topic on Amazon. Do you want to share the names of the books?
Yeah. So one of the books is called Revealed, and it's God's will for your life. And so what I teach many Christians. I do this with youth groups and college students, for the most part. But I teach them, how to find God's will for their life. And I don't really look at it from a subjective standpoint, but I look at it from, as Christians, we read the Bible, we teach the Bible. And so what does the Bible teach about what God wants? Because I believe that, the Bible teaches that you can know God's will by understanding what the scripture says and by applying that into your daily lifestyle, that you will then be more in tune with the will of God. And so, having questions like, where does God want me to go to school? What industry does God want me to work in? Things like that. They begin working themselves out the more that we apply that in life. So that's what that book does. It's actually God's will is revealed in his scripture. So that's kind of the main book that I have going. And then I do really have, a couple of ebooks from the insurance side that, teach on the millionaire insurance producer. So I'm kind of caught up. It's like a tug of war in life. One side of me is pulling on the secular side with regards to insurance consulting because I love it and I just enjoy the personal interaction. And then I've got the other side of the tug of war rope, that's pulling on even the spiritual side. But I don't know if there's anything by life and balance, life balance or life work balance. But I am trying to figure it out day in and day out, and it's actually working out pretty good.
Well, that's a perfect segue to the next question, which is what tools or techniques do you use to stay productive and organized, especially when you're being tugged in 2 directions?
Well, I think I'm one of those people that might fit a little bit more into maybe the bulk of the majority in that I do use technology, but I'm not definitely one of those productivity hacks, that's just, crazy on technology. So I use a few different things, but I don't really, have a lot. I have a calendaring system, I use, on my smartphone, and I sync it to the cloud so that I can utilize it on my various devices. But, I typically, I use, I use my social media platforms for different things. Like my LinkedIn, I actually have a couple of different profiles for LinkedIn based upon what I'm doing. You and I connected on LinkedIn with my insurance consulting one, but I have my other consulting practice for another profile. But I use LinkedIn 100% for business purposes. I use Twitter, really for news purposes. I use Instagram to, continue to see what's going on in the world. Facebook for friends and family. So I use social media profiles, to do business, to do, family, to do personal, just to continue up with life. But from, just from a pure app standpoint, I don't really do too many things. Everything that my smartphone, can do for me that's basically installed, those are the basic systems that I use just to kind of keep myself, active and going forward.
Okay. I think I know some of the answers to this. We talked about some of the books, but what books have you found to be influential in both your business and or personal lives?
Well, as I mentioned that I do read a lot of leadership books. I'm a huge John Maxwell fan. It's one of the better, he's just a very good writer, and he points out leadership. And I truly enjoy that because I believe, like kind of what John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls on leadership. I try to take it to another level. I think that everything rises and falls on applied leadership. And that it's one thing for a leader to, tell you, what you can do and kind of teach you. But if you're not applying it, they haven't led you. And so it has to be applied by you. Same thing goes with my consulting practice. I can teach an agent what to do, but unless they actually begin to apply it in their life, there's going to be no change. And so I do like books that are very applicable. So anything by John Maxwell, really, really helpful. Trying to think of like a story brand book by Don Miller, been very instrumental in regards to the creation of my branding and my website, really kind of creating a storyline for my typical prospect. Great business book, even though it's, much more of a creative standpoint. Again, I just, love novels. And I think even from, a spiritual perspective, I'm never going to give you an answer that's anything different than the Bible. The Bible is actually a composition of 66 different books that actually teach, everything that you would need to go in regards to life and practice. My favorite book of the Bible is the Book of Proverbs. Book of Proverbs is a collection of sayings that really teach wisdom, on how to apply it to your life. Like one of my favorite verses is, "There is wisdom in the multitude of many counselors." I understand that both from a business standpoint and from a personal standpoint, that when I speak to different people who, have understanding or some knowledge in various areas, when I begin asking them what to do, if I was to ask 5 different people, how to handle this particular problem, they're going to give me, their opinions, and I'll be able to utilize those opinions into being able to formulate an actual decision. Whereas if I just kind of come up with my own choices and keep it to myself, I'm probably going to fail a lot more. So it's just reminding myself of that one truth in regards to wisdom, that there's a multitude of wisdom in many counselors. It really helps me figure out how to do life day in and day out. So the Bible for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I will put that information on the show notes for anyone that's listening. And thank you for taking time out of your day. I learned a lot about what you do and how you do it and how you're really making a difference. So you're always welcome. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day.
Nick, I appreciate it. And let me just tell you, I listen to the podcast. I think that you guys are doing a great job for the insurance industry. I wish that more people would listen. And, so long as we have voices like yours and this podcast and other people like you, I truly believe that the insurance industry is on the right path. And so I think myself and many of your listeners just want to say thank you for everything that you're doing. Please do keep it up.
I appreciate that. It really fuels the fire, to keep it going. And we have a lot more work to do. And with, teaming up with people like you, I think we can do it. So thanks again. My guest this week has been Charles Specht of Permission Group. Charles, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Nick. I appreciate it.